My dear brothers and sisters, the gospel today, Jesus Christ gives us a hard statement. He says, "To what shall I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children who sit in the marketplace and call to one another. They play the dirge, but people do not mourn and weep. They play the flute, but people do not dance," meaning we are not listening to the voice of God. We are deaf to his voice. And many times, the reason why we are deaf to his voice is because sin clouds our ability to hear. To hear the voice of God takes our willingness to let go everything that perhaps is resistant within us, preventing us from seeing, hearing, touching, and believing in God, and letting go of the ego that has a tendency to just focus on the exterior rather than the spiritual interior. And so how do we recognize his voice? We must spend time with God in silence. We must spend time with God in a way where, yes, our flesh will be hurting, in a way where our ego, in the midst of dying, will desire to come out even stronger in that moment, attacking us, afflicting us, wanting our life to just only focus on oneself. But the voice of God is very different. The voice of God in the beginning, as St. Ignatius reminds us, if we're living a life away from God, the voice of God will convict us. It will attack our very conscience because it wants to bring us back to God. So becoming aware of that voice is really admitting to ourselves, oh, maybe I have to stop sinning. Maybe I have to stop living a worldly life. Maybe I am being possessed by my interior negative tendencies or emotions or thoughts. And not only to be aware, to accept, and to understand it, but also to reject it, as St. Ignatius says in his spiritual exercise. How do we reject that very voice that is leading us away from God? And the moment we walk back to God, then God gives us consolation and that peace, so that we are mindful that the voice of God will always bring us peace. But that is where we must listen and hear and follow the will of God. But that takes authenticity, that takes sincerity of heart. That also takes accepting and being truthful to oneself, which is probably the hardest thing to do when you are not used to denying yourself. To appease oneself time and time again, what we crave for is consolation. Or as many says, we crave for the fruit, but not the one who gives us the fruit giver. All we want are the sweetness, or the delicious appetites and the feelings. But God, in the midst of our spiritual life, will take that away from us in order to grow deeper in our faith and our deeper desire for the one true God. And so let us listen to God's voice today. Let us be mindful that perhaps his voice many times can also come from people who are challenging. We can also learn from saints, but we can also learn from sinners. God speaks through everybody. But how do we see that? How do we hear that? How do we know that if we do not hear the voice of God within ourselves? And so let us hear God's voice this day. Let us live in the silence. Let us be aware of what's happening, understand, and then reject the very voice of the world or in the voice of Satan. And let us accept the voice of God that will always convict us in those moments when we are coming away from God. And it will give us consolation as we move towards him this very day. And so let's receive God's voice more clearly within our life.